So yes. Right. So let's get yes, it's started recording now. Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Enakshi Samaravikrama and I'd like to welcome you all to the October edition of the Careers Talk series organized by the School of English at the University of Nottingham, Malaysia. So today's talk is titled Supremely Scarlet: What Words Can Do, where our speaker Melissa Chin will talk about her journey from being an English literature major to working in an urban impact organization, and also about the power of language and narrative and so much more. So first of all, a warm welcome to you, Melissa. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so
Um,
much.
so, a little about Melissa Chen. She's an urban sociologist with experience in stakeholder management, strategic communications, and project management in diverse fields ranging from education to healthcare to and urban sustainability. At Think City, she brings her multidisciplinary background to interface between the organization's four flagships, nurturing synergies towards inclusive, livable cities. As a strategy and analytics senior manager, Melissa drives cross collaborative teams and has managed projects involving strategic value capture for transit oriented development, sustainable development strategies, and organizational alignment to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Trained in the liberal arts, Melissa often seeks to build compelling narratives and connect disparate threads of various issues towards addressing multidimensional city challenges and transforming urban outcomes. So we're all excited to hear from Melissa. But just before that, I want to remind everyone a couple of things. Please make sure you have your audio turned off during the talk to avoid any disruptions. There will be a Q&A session afterwards for about 20 minutes. You can ask your questions and make any comments then. So now I'd like to hand the mic over to Melissa.
Thank you so much. I'm Melissa. I'm really honored to be here. As a fellow lit student, I feel like a kindred spirit with all of you guys. Yeah, so thanks for asking me to share a little bit of my journey today. Um, it's been quite a winding journey, and I never would have expected to land up, in an urban impact organization. So I'm excited to share a little bit with you today. I believe Anakshi's going to share the slides. Able to just now. Oh, nice. Uh, Thanks so much. Yeah, so we'll just start with a little bit of a comic. I'll give you a second to read it. It's by False Needs. Yeah, this is a silly little comic, but I think it says quite a bit. I think some of it is really flowery, a lot of alliteration. All you lit majors will enjoy that. Um, and that has its power, right? Saying things in that way has its power. But saying things straight up also has their power, right? So it's just really red, and that's beautiful and that's powerful as well. And I think even a silence, the dot dot dot, can be extremely powerful, if not even more so. In the next slide, I just pull that out a little, but like the choice of words, and even chosen silences have power and meaning. And I think that just encapsulates what today is all about. So the next uh, 30 minutes or so, maybe 40 minutes, will be split into two sections. So far, so okay is, I guess, my story or my journey so far. I'll share a little bit about that with you. We'll do a small little activity together. It's not difficult, I promise. And the second part of it is just about what words can do. So next slide. It's been a very odd and windy journey, and I tried to draw that out for you pretty poorly. Also just from the beginning, I've always loved books and words, even from when I was very little. And I eventually did my BA in English literature and comparative history of ideas. I delved into the world of strategic communications and took a little loop-de-loop into urban sociology. I then spent some time in an architecture firm before finding my way to Think City. And I've left a little bit of room at the end of that dotted line because I have no idea where I'm going to be 2 days from now, let alone 2 years from now. But I'm going to take you through a little bit of this journey, and hopefully you can resonate with some of it, and it'll give you ideas for what possibilities might be appropriate for you as well. So maybe the next slide. Yeah, so I've loved books ever since I can remember. I was a tiny little nerd. Uh, I loved being read to as a child, and these were some of my favorite books growing up. I loved Beatrix Potter. I really enjoyed The Magic Faraway Tree when I could read on my own with Moonface and all the adventures that they had. I read these Roald Dahls over and over and over again. I thought they were hilarious. And that's probably not that different than a lot of you, I'm guessing. You probably had a pretty similar experience, which is why you're here and doing what you're doing at the moment. And the next slide. Eventually, I left for university to study English literature. So a high five, all of you. Um, I was looking for pictures, and it was a significantly long time ago for me. I was looking at pictures, and it doesn't look like I've done a lot of studying in these pictures. It looks more like some kayaking and a lot of laying in the sun. But when I was in these classrooms and libraries, I just gave you some pictures to picture it. I focused on 17th century literature, so a lot of Shakespeare and John Donne and Milton and the whole shebang of Elizabethan literature. I don't really know why. I think I took one class in 17th century lit and I loved the professor who taught it, and I just went deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. I was also interested in a lot of critical theory. So Edward Said and Michel Foucault, a little bit of Marx as well. The bottom line is just that the tiny nerd became a big nerd, and that's where it happened. The next slide. Yeah, I think maybe like many of you, like Isaac maybe as well, I really had no idea how to kickstart my career after university. It's really great that you have, this kind of exposure, career talks, help from your professors and the university, from Shivani and Anakshi as well. I had no clue. What do you do with an English degree? So I had a friend who suggested that I work in the communications field, and my first real job ended up being at this global public relations and media firm called Fleischman Hillard. It's on the left. It's an American company, but they have offices all over the country and all over the world. And I was put into the corporate and finance practice group, where I had very corporate and very financy clients, and I knew nothing about any of them. So I just had to learn. And really, that experience taught me how to work. I knew nothing. I thought I knew everything, but I really knew nothing. I learned how to write emails, how to deal with clients, deal with stakeholders, how to manage upwards, dealing with bosses. I think that's actually a pretty important thing to learn. I learned business development, how to write proposals, things like that. And I spent about 2 years doing that. I'll give you a little anecdote. My very first day of work at Fleischman Hillard was a 14-hour day. I got into the office a little bit before 9 and left at about midnight. And I just thought I've made a huge mistake. It was a lot of very long days at a PR agency. Yeah, so after about 2 years of that, I was really looking to contribute a little bit more. I wanted to be part of something bigger. I wanted to find a little bit more meaning in the work that I was doing. And if I was going to be working 14 hours a day, I felt like it should go towards something that was bigger than myself. And on the right there, I joined Teach for Malaysia. Somewhere in that picture. Actually, I didn't even look to see if I was in there. But I led communications and branding through the first, I'm going to say, 3 cohorts of Teach for Malaysia. I don't know if you've heard of Teach for Malaysia. Yeah, but I think the takeaway from all of this was just that nothing is wasted in any of these experiences. I don't work in strategic comms now. I'm glad that I don't. I don't really want to work in strategic comms anymore, but really nothing is wasted. If you take the learnings from each experience and make the most of it, there's a through line from the things that I learned during those experiences that really help in the work that I do today as well. And the next slide, maybe just to give you a little bit of an idea of what communications and strategic comms is. It may sound like a lot of, writing press releases maybe, and there's some of that, quite a bit of that. And branding may sound like, I don't know, designing logos, and there is a good amount of that as well. But it's also about building campaigns, about establishing relationships with members of the media, and taking those relationships into everything that you're doing. It's about advocacy and public education through things like news articles. So there's one from the Star that I managed to find. Op-eds, interviews, podcasts. And I actually managed to find a podcast on BFM from 2011, a long time ago, and it's still up on their site. So nothing's wasted from the work that I did all the way back then. But yeah, so it's a lot of different kinds of work. But mostly, I think to sum up strategic communications in the next slide, it really was about engaging and managing a lot of different players in the ecosystem, all our key stakeholders. So, maybe some of it is about writing and reporting, but a lot of it is about managing a lot of different kinds of people. And what we used to do was we used to run TFM Week. A colleague and I used to put together a yearly week-long event. It would happen in schools all over the country. It was a logistics nightmare. But we would invite, CEOs and, people from the Ministry of Education, funders, national athletes, artists, celebrities, advocates, all these kinds of people. We would invite them into classrooms in public schools, in underserved government schools, to just give them a real understanding of what the challenges are in underserved schools, what it's like there, and to also give them a little bit of a taste of what it's like to teach in those classes. So we had, CEOs, like I think we had the Telkom Axiata CEO, we had politicians like Idris Jala come into the classroom. Jimmy Choo came and taught as well in schools in Penang. And the pictures that I found and put up here for you, Marina Mahathir came and talked about, I believe she talked about art and travel and just gave the kids an insight into a really different world. And Aisha Sinclair also came and taught a class. And that picture was captured, I think, when we asked her what was more nerve-wracking, like when she had to actually, go live on the air, or when she had to prepare for this 1 hour teaching session with kids in schools. And she was like, definitely teaching was more terrifying. So more power out there to all the teachers, to Shivani and Inakshi and to Isaac as well. It's a hard job. But yeah, so a lot of the job that I held was about managing all these different stakeholders and giving them these experiences and making sure that they were bought into the cause, and that everybody was on the same page. But it's really not just these big wigs, who are the important stakeholders. The students that we served were probably the most important stakeholders that we had. So, we would try to, organize these field trips to PetroScience. There's one that you see on the upper right corner. We learned that students from schools in Puchong had never been to KLCC. It's really not that far away, 30 minutes drive at the most. But really, it was a whole other world. They had grown up and gone to secondary school and had never stepped outside, had never visited, the Twin Towers. And they just had a completely different experience of life. Students from Segambut, it's just back to Mon Kiara, had asked us if we had ever had spaghetti before, because they had never tasted spaghetti before. So I think that's just a picture of how different lives could be for them, and how important it was that we were doing work with them, and how they are the most important stakeholders that we were serving. So we would try to give them all sorts of different kinds of exposure, to manage our stakeholders, manage these students, and give them options, right? So we provided as much exposure as we could, experiences to see maybe even different kinds of job opportunities. On the bottom right image, there's a bunch of students from SMK Sungai Bayur. I was in Rantau Panjang and Perak, and we took them on a little trip, Lawatan Sambil Belajar, to the Hot FM studio, where they got to have a picture of, what it's like to put together a radio show and to be a DJ, and just to see and feel something different. I think I just want to pause here and just, put a pin in this and say that language is really important in this experience that I had, in TFM and definitely, in the PR firm. Words and language were so important because we needed to be able to send the same message, to really hammer in that message about education and equity, but we had to do it across so many different kinds of stakeholders, so many different players in the industry. We almost had to speak different languages to be able to get that message across, so it would be different, even though it's the same, core, it would be a different language to speak to the Ministry of Education, or when we spoke to corporate funders, it would come, in a slightly different angle, or to students even, students are exposed to just completely different things and you have to speak to them in different ways. We spoke differently to parents as well and had to manage them and buy them into the work that we were doing because it was quite different. Even in recruiting potential fellows from universities all over the world, that requires a different language as well. But it all shared the same core message. And it really is amazing how powerful words and language can be, that it can do that. And that's one thing that you have, and that's one thing that you're learning at the moment that's extremely useful in whatever job that you do. Yeah, so at TFM, I think I got a taste for the complexity of issues. For many schools and for a lot of students, the issues weren't just about education. Improving the quality of teaching in schools is really important. Improving the syllabus is also, super key. But it wasn't just a problem in isolation, especially not when students come into school when they're hungry because there's not enough food to go around at home. Or maybe they're tired because they've been working at their parents' Ramly Burger stall all night. In that case, the best syllabus and the best teachers, are still in an uphill battle because it's a whole ecosystem of correlated issues. None of those issues come in isolation. And I was really interested in this like multi-layered complexity of these issues, which is what drew me to urban studies, that sort of intersection between, built environment, so, buildings and roads and infrastructure, but also the importance of the people who live and work and grow in these cities and these places, as well as all the systems that support it and bind all of it together. So I was really interested in these complex issues, and urban studies basically gave me the opportunity to look at those things. So in the next slide, I left working life for a little bit. I took a little break to get my master's degree in city design and social science, just a weird way of saying urban sociology. I think English Lit actually put me in a great place for urban sociology. All the training I got to parse texts, to dissect issues, to take, things that seem like they're unrelated, understand how they connect with each other in order to find out, how to solve problems. So I think the skills that you get from training in English Lit actually puts you in a great stead to do those things. But English Lit really didn't prepare me at all for the planning and city design and the drawing parts of it. It was a huge struggle town for me, but I just had to figure that part out. Yeah, so I think this is the expectation of what graduate school would look like. So for those of you applying to graduate school, I was like, yay, graduation. That's what you picture, field study trips. I got to go to Beirut in Lebanon on a week-long field study trip. It's like, yay, woo. Those are the fun parts. That's the expectation of graduate school. In the next slide, you see most of the reality of graduate school. It was a lot of studio work in pretty depressing university buildings, tons and tons and tons of readings, tutorials, discussion groups, things like that, stuff that you're probably familiar with. And then even more studio work. We would work both with a design element as well as a more sociological text-based element, and we had to bring all those things together. So it was very gray and very indoors. Um, yeah, so that's the reality of what graduate school was for me. So then it became time to face, these complex and interdisciplinary issues in practice. I graduated and I started work at an architecture firm. I spent about 4 years at a large architecture firm in KL. And I just found that architects often work in a design silo. They're mostly concerned about, the design of buildings and developments and making it look pretty and aesthetic, but not necessarily about people who will fill those buildings, fill those developments, live and work in them. Yeah, so I think a lot of my job was to be an advocate for human beings. I did all sorts of things from knowledge management to some master planning. I worked on proposals. I did a significant bit of research on architectural history. But really, my job was to speak for people and to put people into these buildings and these developments. And I used that experience. And 2 years ago, I joined Think City. And again, it's quite a vast difference between the expectation on the left of, maybe influencing policy. That's what I imagined it would be like. Speaking at conferences, and there's a little bit of that. But the reality is this, that it's more studio work, lots of work in tiny rooms, parsing data, dissecting maps, finding solutions, surprise, surprise, right? Studied for it, and that's exactly what happened in reality as well. So maybe I'll just share a little bit about what we do at Think City. I guess it's partially consulting work with a very specific niche in urban interventions. We work on all sorts of things that have to do with cities, anything from transit, like your LRT and MRT, to economic development strategies, to climate and environmental resilience. If you imagine the floods that have been happening, there's work that we do in disaster risk resilience and sponge cities and things like that as well. So it runs quite a gamut. It's quite a wide range of things to do. I'll share a little bit with you. I just plonked it in from the deck that we usually have. In the next slide, just a little bit about Think City in case anybody's interested. I don't know. But we're an impact organization, and what we do is work to make cities more resilient, more inclusive, and more livable. And in the next slide, we started in Georgetown, working on the UNESCO World Heritage Graz. So that was 13 years ago now, and expanded work to KL, Johor Bahru, all over the country, really. And today, we're actually looking at work not just throughout the region, but even in the world. We're looking at work in India, Indonesia, and even Cote d'Ivoire in Africa. There's development. So a wide range of activities that we do, but yeah, I think City actually sits in quite a unique position. And the next slide is fine. We have a particular value proposition. We consider ourselves a think and do tank, not just a think tank, where we do a good amount of strategic work and policy related work, but also we don't shy away from, turun padang and getting down and dirty and getting into the project implementation parts of things and yeah, execution and not just thinking and strategy as well. We consider ourselves very evidence-based and very experimental. We basically fail a lot and try to learn from whatever we fail in. And we're also a very neutral platform. We inhabit this particular space where we are neither public nor private, but we work closely between public and private sectors. We also work a lot with international agencies like UN Habitat and the Aga Khan Trust for Culture. And we work directly with communities as well. So we're able to pull all these different stakeholders in and work together with them and try to push them in the same direction to create solutions for cities. Okay, I've done the Think City spiel. I can't keep talking about myself anymore, so we're going to do an activity break. So let's talk about skills to pay the bills. Okay, skills that don't pay the bills either, especially in my case. So it's a career talk, and I think understanding what your skills are pretty important when you're exploring career options. So for me, I'll give you an example.
所以是 yes
okay.
exactly okay so 就是这样
muted.
okay so 那我们开始
Okay, my top skill, number one skill, eating a whole bag of chips in one sitting. Excellent at it. I'm the best. Yeah. Next skill, the Irish exit or the French exit, some people call it. Being able to sneak out of a gathering or a party without saying goodbye and without anybody stopping me from leaving. I am the best. Number one. And the last one, probably my only marketable skill, is reading and writing. I have no other skills. I can't count, pretty bad at counting. I definitely can't draw. I'm worse, right? At least counting, I can use Excel, but I can't draw at all. But I can read and write, and that's about it. But reading and writing have actually taught me a lot of things that come in really handy at work every day that are actually really useful for building a career. I think I've been trained to join the dots, to find points of connection between things that seem like they don't connect to each other. And I think I've been trained to read between the lines. That's what you're trained to do as well, right? And that's incredibly useful. It helps you to put a pitch together for new work, that's business development. It helped me to explain extremely technical processes in ways that are easy to understand for, different audiences, for a layman, for a ministry, for different kinds of people. I think, reading and writing a lot helps you to understand how to capture an audience, and at some point, any point in your life, you're going to have to persuade someone, negotiate with someone, and that gives you the skills to do that, and I think probably the biggest one is to be able to look at a problem or to look at a text, parse it, to be able to pull problems apart and then look at all those different parts and understand what the issues are. And that's really important. If you want to, be able to find solutions, that's a really important step to be able to do. And your lit training teaches you exactly how to do that, right? It's also important for convincing stakeholders, different kinds of stakeholders, your bosses, your clients, people that you're working with. Words are really useful to be able to convince people and persuade people to move in the same direction. So for example, for something that we work on in Think City, we might be working for, a corporation that does, buses in a city or something like that. But in order for us to change how buses work in a city, we have to work not just with the corporation, we have to probably work with bus operators, we probably have to work with DBKL, with the municipal council and all sorts of different kinds of people, and to communicate clearly and effectively to get all those people on the same page and moving in the same direction so that we all have a better bus service. So just examples of my top skills, my silly top skills, but I just wanted to do a short activity, and the next slide. I want you to just take a few minutes to think about what your top skills are. 3 things, 1 thing, doesn't matter. It's just a silly little break. And I would love it if you would share. You could unmute to share, or if you're shy, you can just pop it in the chat as well. Here, all the things that you're good at. Eating a whole pizza is pretty impressive. We have competition. Looking for a whole mala session without breaking a sweat. Oh, okay. Wow. I'm terrible with mala, so I'm very impressed. Oversleeping. Oh no, Chania. Staying up all night to read manga, but not for your class readings. Hey, manga, is also incredible and probably teaches you all sorts of different things. So I don't think that that's a bad thing. Couple of people still typing. Relaxing in nature-based settings, that's good too. I think relaxing and like sleeping well at night. I think when you get to a certain stage where sleeping doesn't come as easily as it used to. Take a couple more and then oh no. Very good at falling asleep in the mosque. I'm trying to help you out here, guys, but like, it's really hard to be positive about everything. Okay, I'm gonna call it. You guys can keep going and I can read them later. Ooh, okay, this is a good one. Reading, writing, public speaking. Wow, giving presentations, analytical skills, connecting ideas that might elude others. That's incredible. Those are extremely useful skills, not like my eating an entire bag of chips. Thank you for sharing that. Talking to people about difficult topics and disagreeing, I think that is huge as well. Being able to disagree well. Those are important things and really useful when you're dealing with a lot of different kinds of people. Thank you for sharing. I can see how this is just the beginning of your journey and you're on to great things, lots of eating pizza, lots of public speaking, and there's a bright future for all of you ahead for sleeping at the mosque. Thank you so much for sharing. I really enjoyed hearing from all of you guys. Yeah, so I'll just carry on from here. As you can see from my top skills, I don't have many marketable skills. Maybe some of you struggle with that as well. I can do what most 7-year-olds can do all over the world. I can read, I can write. I think we often take for granted, many people take for granted that everyone can do that. And it's sort of true, everyone, children, can also read and write. But it's also not true. If we go to the next slide and the following one. Yeah, so it's true that everyone can read and write, but it's not true that everyone can read and write, right? So language is extremely persuasive and narratives are super powerful. And when wielded well, words can place you in a narrative. Words can determine a narrative, and they can change the trajectory as well. And that's what I just wanted to cover a little bit here today. I'm sure you know better than many others, but I just wanted to remind you about what your top skills are and how they can really move mountains. So in the next slide, first of all, how words can place you in the narrative. So I'll give you an example in the next slide with Taylor Swift. Bear with me, be patient with me. I think this, I'm trying to look at it, from 2013. She was loved and beloved by everyone. She was a media darling until all of a sudden in 2013, she just wasn't anymore. I don't know if you guys remember this period when she was criticized for a lot of things. She was mocked pretty openly, but probably most for her romantic relationships, right? So I think here it says that, probably every man or pop star that she's ever dated or spoken to or even walked by, says, uh-oh, when she goes back into the studio. That she has this ever-growing wreckage heap of famous exes. In the next slide, even the New York Times got in on it, wrote about, what on her shoes and where the trouble began and about all her romantic relationships and things like that. Yeah, and the public opinion and media presented a very particular narrative about Taylor Swift. And in the next slide, it wasn't all peachy, right, for her. And the haters definitely did a lot of hating. But words gave her the opportunity to put her own story and her perspective into the ether. She had a platform of songwriting and she used words pretty powerfully, right? She said, I go on too many dates, but I can't make them stay. And that's what people say. But I keep cruising, can't stop, won't stop moving. And basically her songwriting was a platform that gave her the language and the power to say, suck it, right? And to repossess the narrative for what she wanted to present. And love her or hate her, she did that extremely effectively, and she used words to do that. So her words placed her own story in this larger narrative, and it allowed her to, shake it off. Yeah, so powerful, right? Words can also determine the narrative. Next slide. There are three characters here. The Wicked Witch of the West from The Wizard of Oz, Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians, Joker, the famed enemy of Batman. Are they villains? In those three stories, they are, right? But, are they just misunderstood? Was Elphaba misunderstood? Was Cruella just a misfit with, black and white hair? And was the Joker really just struggling with mental illness? In these stories, in Wicked, in Cruella, and in Joker, as opposed to, The Wizard of Oz and 101 Dalmatians and the stories of Batman, these origin stories provide a new perspective and a shift in the narrative. And narratives can do that, right? You can shift from, thinking that someone is a terrible person or a terrible villain to, helping to understand what's really going on, right? And words can really determine that narrative, and narrative can do that. So it's not just about, writing movies or musicals, or not even about writing books or news articles. It can also take the form of teaching, communicating ideas, selling a pitch, doing those things well and using words powerfully can really determine different outcomes and determine what the narrative is. Writing can determine not just narrative, but also tone and mood. It can make you laugh. And when it makes you laugh, it changes everything, right? Stand-up comedians can talk about the most controversial issues, but if they can make you laugh, all bets are off, right? Or satire, so effective. Words are really powerful and they can determine an entire narrative. On the next slide, finally, words can change the trajectory. So a different example here, Jay-Z. I don't know how much any of you guys listen to hip hop. You really should. I feel like as lit students. Um, but Jay-Z transformed his personal trajectory with words, right? So Michael Eric Dyson is an author. He wrote a book about Jay-Z, and he's also a political pundit. He's written lots of different things. But he says, he explains how Jay-Z changed his life using words. So as a young drug dealer, he used his gift of rhyme to escape the treacherous projects in Brooklyn and became the first billionaire hip hop artist. Right. So in the next slide, he uses words and an extremely powerful use of punctuation to completely redefine himself. In the Kanye West song "Diamonds Are from Sierra Leone," there's a remix featuring Jay-Z, and he says, "I'm not a businessman. I'm a businessman." Punctuation is important. So he doesn't just run a business. He says that like he is the business. Billionaire hip hop artist. That's powerful. So he uses words to redefine himself, and he also uses words to change societal trajectories. In the next slide, he's able to put a spotlight on the continued traumas of slavery and the African American experience as well. And he does this in so many of his songs, this one, Oceans, and so many others. It's also an incredible use of juxtaposition. He talks about how the oceans that brought vessels full of slaves from Africa are the same oceans where glamorous yacht parties take place, including parties thrown by or attended by these hip hop mega stars as well. And he pulls out that juxtaposition in an incredibly powerful way. So he uses words to change situations and change trajectories. And the next slide, Jay-Z is really a case study for what words can do. Slide. Stuck. Oh, there we go. Had to include a little picture of Beyonce. But yeah, words can change trajectories, and Jay-Z himself talked about it. And there's a book called Decoded, which is a lot about the writing that he's done. He says, words can make a change through conversation and not through censorship. So literally through using language instead of, banning or stopping the use of language. And he says that great rap plants dissonance in your head and it challenges you. So words can describe difference, it can highlight inequity and really challenge norms and change not just personal trajectories, but also societal ones as well. Your next slide, I'm just wrapping up. I hope that your takeaway from today is really that language is power. So powerful. You just asked Toni Morrison, and if you haven't read Beloved or The Bluest Eye, if you haven't read Toni Morrison at all, you absolutely should. She got the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1993, and in her speech, her acceptance speech, she said that word work is sublime. It makes meaning that secures our human difference. We die, and that may be the meaning of life, but we do language. That may be the measure of our lives. They're powerful. Language is power. And the next slide, reiterating again that language is power. And just to remind you guys that you have the training to wield that power. You're getting it right now if you've already gotten it. Next slide. Little struggle town. There we go. Yep, quoting from Toni Morrison again. She says that the choice word, the choice silence, unmolested language surges to its knowledge and not to its destruction. Language is so powerful, and you are just at the beginning of your journey, learning how to wield that power and that responsibility as well. I think I just have maybe one more slide. just to wrap it all up, that language is powerful and it really is humanity. And to me, this is why literature and words are so important. And it makes me so happy to know that all of you guys are dedicating years of your life into it. Language is humanity because it shapes how we see the world, but it also has this unique capacity to shape the world itself. And I think Arundhati Roy does that in an incredible way. It's a super long quote, but I don't know how to say it any better. I'm not going to compete with Arundhati Roy. I'm just going to read it. And she talks about the world falling apart and why literature is so important, even as that happens. She said, as the ice caps melt, as oceans heat up, and water tables plunge, as we rip through the delicate web of interdependence that sustains life on Earth, as our formidable intelligence leads us to breach the boundaries between humans and machines, and our even more formidable hubris undermines our ability to connect the survival of our planet to our survival as a species. As we replace art with algorithms and stare into a future in which most human beings may not be needed to participate in or be remunerated for economic activity. Pretty bleak world that she's painting, very real. She says that the place for literature is built by writers and readers. That's you and me, right? It's a fragile place in some ways, but also an indestructible one. When it's broken, we can rebuild it because we need shelter. Literature provides shelter, shelter of all kinds. So language is incredibly powerful. Words can place you in the narrative, it can determine the narrative, and it can even change seemingly unchangeable trajectories. So words can change the world, and they always have for centuries, right? And really, as an English lit major, you can do almost anything. You may not be able to cure cancer or build robots or make rocket ships fly, but you can do a lot. You may have a career in teaching or weirdly like me in urban interventions. You could end up in law and journalism or maybe something completely left field, music or performance. You could also have multiple careers and many interests, multiple evolutions of where you pour your energy into, and that's fine. It's wonderful. It makes you more interesting. You're only limited by your imagination. And through it all, you have the power of language on your side. That's it from me. Thank you all.
Right. Thank you, Melissa. That was one of the most fun career talk I have ever been to.
Silly.
It's really, yes, it is. Loved your activity. Thank you so much. So I think we have a few minutes for some Q&A. It's time for questions. We do have only, until about 6. We have like 6, I think maybe about like 10 minutes, let's see. So please, you can either unmute yourselves and ask your questions, or you can type them into the little chat box and I will read them out. Does anybody want to go first? I actually had a couple of questions, I think, until people are ready to ask, which might be putting you a little bit on the spot, Melissa, but
okay.
So because we are gearing this towards also people who want to go into new careers, or they've finished their degree and now are looking at what they can do, because English, like you said, there is so much to do. Do you have any advice for somebody who is starting out? I have my degree now. What do I do with my life? Like you talked about it a little bit, but do you have any specific pointers?
I don't know if this is going to be a pointer. It may not be helpful as you're going through it, but I'm going to say it really doesn't matter what you pick. You can learn from anything. And I think the most important thing is to just gather up those experiences, learn what you like and what you hate, and use that to figure it out along the way. I think also figuring out what your skills are. I know it's such a stupid little activity, but that's pretty important. Figuring out what you're good at and what you enjoy, that's a huge part about what your career should be, right? Knowing your strengths, working on whatever you're not as good at, but figuring out what you like and what you want. I think those are questions to ask yourself.
Yeah, that kind of went right into, you kind of touched on one of the important things is in terms of how do you figure out what your marketable skills are. That can be really tricky. How did you try to identify that to see what you could actually pay the bills with?
Yeah, I mean, I think also, I mean, using language to your advantage in this case, right? And you look at, you know, kind of a job description that you're interested in you and that you want to do, um, you know, being able to parse your own experiences, to look at the text of your life and your CV and being able to match those things and find those connections between what, you know, you've done and what you want to do. Um, yeah, I mean, using your skills, your strengths to do that.
Does anybody have any questions? I see two people with their two cameras on. Anybody who wants to ask any questions, chat box or unmute yourselves and ask.
Just unmute
Whichever you
yourselves.
Yes, I do actually.
Okay.
Thanks, Melissa. So my question is, I think a lot of employers value the skills that we have developed as literature students or like linguistic students, creative writing students. But sometimes like I find myself in that position where I ask myself, do I have any industry specific knowledge or experience to offer? And have you ever found yourself in that position where you know you're good at reading, you're good at writing, and you know how to use language well, but then when it comes to industry specific knowledge, that how do we convince them that we could compensate in that regard, that we will be of value to them?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think you can't run away from that. You know, when you wanted to go, you want to go into a specific industry, you have to either develop experience in that area or again, use your skills or use your superhuman reading skills to learn, speak to people, you know, do internships, you know, do projects, work on projects on the side. I, you know, way before I even went to graduate school, you know, I was really interested in housing, especially for, you know, public and social housing. And I would, you know, join talks about that, join groups that were discussing it and thinking about solutions for that. Just to build your experience in those ways. And I'll tell you that even when I'm interviewing people, or when I'm looking for people to come and work with us or even intern with us, not a lot of people have, you know, a degree in urban studies, you know, but when I look for people, I'm really looking for people who are interested, who have a great attitude, um, in the subject matters that we're looking at. So maybe they don't have the most experience, but content can be learned and can be taught. But I'm looking at those skills that I need. And so hopefully that's encouraging for you as well. But you also can't run away, right? When you're looking at industry specific stuff, you just have to learn that stuff.
Without being affiliated with an institution, how do we pick up those skills? Just find out whatever that's out there in the public. Like I see so many websites, they say like when they advertise their creative writing or literature courses, they say, oh, you may go into the legal industry, for example. But then
Yeah,
I haven't been to law school. Like, how do I suddenly just
that's a
go
tougher
into
one.
like a legal firm? So
Kim Kardashian does it. So I mean, I think there's also it's a different world, you know, today, and you can go into courses that are online. You can pick up books on it. I really think that speaking to people and increasing your network and sort of edging your way into those industries is incredibly useful as well. So I'll just give you an example. I have someone who works in our team who is a geology major. She literally studied rocks in university. Um, Extremely specific, pretty technical. But she works for us now because, you know, she was, you know, she could prove her worth in being able to build case studies. That's a huge boon for some of the work that we do, which is also really about language. being able to research. But she also did 2-hour courses every night for months on GIS, which is Global Information System. So being able to map things spatially and visually. And that really gave her an edge over other people because she was able to combine different skill sets that she had and to sell it enough that you said, okay, maybe you don't have any experience in urban interventions, are a geologist, but to cobble together what you do have and to make it appealing to an employer. It is possible. Law might be a little tougher, might require particular certification and training. I'm sure there are ways to edge into it as well.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks.
Does anybody else have any questions? If not, we can actually wind down. Just give people
3, 2, 1. Oh, is there a question?
Zara.
Hi, hello. Hi. Thank you so much for your talk. I found it very interesting. I think my question would be that I feel like as a literature major, so I'm studying English with creative writing. So I'm in year 2, but I also feel like even for English majors, they're like typical parts. I would say like maybe journalism, advertising, marketing. Like it doesn't really expand beyond that, but like the path you're on right now, it's like out of the box, I would say. So like when it comes to making those connections between like literature and like narrative and like things we learn, also like different fields which you would like never match together, like how can we make those connections like actually like how can we make those connections work or even like notice those connections?
How do we notice those connections? I think you just got to work at it. I think you're being trained to do it right now. Think of it as, dissecting. What are you reading at the moment?
Right now, we were reading David Copperfield most recently.
Yeah. So I think David Copperfield, I think you can think about it in terms of a story about a protagonist. You can also think about it as, something written in England and is Dickens like 18th century?
I think early.
It's also about society at a particular time, and you're really being trained to notice those connections between what was true then and what is true now. That's one thing that could be completely different, but you're finding as you read it that it's maybe not so different, right? So you're being trained right now to make those connections, and I think working on that will allow you to find those connections more and more. And it's the kind of thing that like those magic illusion figures, it's like once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? And it's just a muscle that you have to work at to be able to do that. I'm also happy to send my email address out if anybody is interested in this sort of out of the box or just a different career path. I'm happy to talk to anybody, or if anybody is looking at internships, also happy to field those.
Okay, all right, that's very interesting. So like are you open to like offering internships and stuff like that?
Yeah, we do take on interns, and we have a very different sort of practice groups within Think City. So, some practice groups may be better suited for you, and some, depending on your interests as well. We work, I work a lot with data and project management within strategy and analytics. We have teams that work on conservation and heritage and culture work. We have teams that also work on social and climate resilience, and culture-led economic development as well. And if those things are interesting to you, you can definitely look on the website and get my email address from either Shivani or Inakshi as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for answering my question. Thank you.
Melissa, if you, since you said that you would like to share your email address, maybe you can type it into the chat box if you so wish to. Yeah, instead of us sending another email or something.
Sure, I can do that. Yeah. Maybe just blur it out for your YouTube.
Yes, well, yes. I think actually we can send it later. Okay. All right.
Too late. You'll have to blur it out.
It's done.
Yeah, it's done. But yeah, I think if that's something that's interesting to you, you can definitely reach out to us. And I'll have high expectations from the students to be able to sell themselves.
Thank you, Zahra. Thank you, everyone, for asking questions. And so I think with this, we can end this talk. So thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Melissa, for being here. It was a really interesting talk and gave us a lot of ideas about what else we can do, something a little different from the usual. So before we leave, if anybody wants, if you want to, we can switch on cameras and try a photo together. If not, that's also fine. So does anybody want to try that? Because I think I'm going to switch on together mode if you all would like to switch. Thank you. Yes.
A couple more. Come on.
Yes, a few more, please. Anybody who wants to show their lovely faces? No?
Okay, no pressure.
Yeah, no, absolutely no pressure. And okay. Let me just try. Yeah. Took one, just the four of us.
Okay, guess so.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Melissa, for being here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm not sure if I said this before, but yes, this event was recorded and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. It's UNM English. If you're not subscribed, please do. All of our career and research talks are uploaded there. All right. Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a lovely long weekend.
Happy Deepavali to those celebrating.
Yes, happy Deepavali to everybody. Yes, so with that, we can end this session. So you can leave the meeting if you'd like to.
All right, bye everyone. Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Bye.